The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Remember that show back then? Remember that show? Turn on the TV, time was always flying. Why did they have to end? So many shows you forgotten. Now that we've got a podcast, we can release all the shows from our hands. Yeah, will you be the most TV dudes you'll ever listen to? As long as we keep on talking sitcoms and cartoons from back in the day. Okay, we confess, we're obsessed, but we got a podcast to help you remember that show. Well, it's a podcast about obscure TV shows. We're finally covering one that you most likely know. It stars Drew Carey and not Matthew Perry. Oh, and I am Adam Pope. Hey!
Hey there, TV lovers and employees of the Winfred Louder department store, to Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. I'm William Bruce West.
And we are ready to get into all the shenanigans that were going down in Cleveland throughout the 90s. But first, we have to visit our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Theme Song.
Our show today takes place in an office with lots of kooky co-workers. Adam, who was the wackiest person you ever had to work with?
Look, I worked with a lot of crazy folks over the years. I mean, I got to tell you, my first job was at Disneyland, lots of characters there, all that kind of stuff. But in my career, long term, there was a guy named Joey who was the most New York guy you ever saw in your life. He's just like rotund, 50-year-old dude. He had slicked back hair that was thinning. He had gold chains and rings. He was super tan. He was all bravado and just loud and missing some teeth and had his wheezy laughter. And it was just, he was always just telling stories about his dad being connected to the mob and growing up in New York and all that kind of stuff. He actually said that when the Sopranos showrunners were doing research, they approached him to be on the show as some sort of like background character and stuff. I was like, that's New Jersey, not New York, but whatever. It's all connected. He didn't accept the role because he didn't want to mock the lifestyle and maybe get in trouble with some of the people that he knew. He was just like, yeah, it's not safe for me. It was his story. But he was living in Arizona at the time. That's where I was working when I met him. So maybe he was trying to get away from that type of
He was in hiding.
Yeah.
Witness protection.
The funny thing was I was making a short film during this time. And so I cast him as a cab driver in that movie. And we just like improv'd a bunch of scenes back and forth. And he was hilarious. But just overall, just larger than life, ridiculous. And yes, telling wild stories that nobody believed. How about for you, Will?
I don't know. I've had a lot of jobs and I've known a lot of crazy people. But I guess I would go back to my first one. My first job was Toys R Us. I started like the week after my high school graduation. And I've always looked back on Toys R Us in the sense that like I did 2 different stints there over a decade and just how they were polar opposites. Like when I started, I was the youngest person working at Toys R Us, like in that store, which makes no sense to me. You'd think that would be like an after-school job for kids or something. No, there were a lot of ex-cons. There were a lot of like got discharged from the service. Like our bike guy, he had to wear sleeves because like he had forearm tattoos and they didn't want him on the floor like that, things like that. But then when I went back to Toys R Us, I was the oldest one. So it was almost like Screech coming back to Bayside. And now like everyone else is young and I'm like the elder statesman and that was weird. But like when I first started, the first bike guy, his name was Garrett. And he always smelled like the cheapest tobacco. But like he was my first conspiracy theorist theorists. Like, you always saw them on TV and like people making fun of like, oh, they think they saw Bigfoot or they thought they like saw Elvis at the Waffle House. But like, no, like Garrett had, like, he believed his theories, and it was nothing like, oh yeah, the aliens have been here. It was more like government concern, like that kind of stuff. But like I've mentioned before, where like he has a very intricate idea as to what actually happened to John F. Kennedy Jr., but we're a family podcast, so I won't go into detail.
Wow.
But like I will never forget Garrett for that. Like, he was just like crazy chain smoking conspiracy theorist, and he was like this like old black guy too. Because like you think of conspiracy theorists of like, oh, they're these white guys in the hills and stuff. No, I learned that conspiracies do not know race.
That's wild. Yeah. It is interesting, it's just like, especially at a job where there's so much time to kill, right? A lot of times. And so you just start hearing this stuff coming out. I'm always the quiet guy at work, if you can believe it. Like, I'm just like, I don't know how involved I want to get with the people around here, because I know what happens when you let people start talking, So yeah.
Also, you see these different perspectives, and then you're just kind of like, I don't know. I remember, like, at that same Toys R Us, there was one guy, Ramon. We used to, like, unload the truck together, and he would tell me, like, you don't marry for love, you marry for security. Because, like, every time an attractive woman would come in, they'd go, like, go to channel 11, and then they'd, like, stalk her through the store, and I'd be like, but Ramon, you're married. And he's like, well, you don't marry for love, you marry for security. And then he'd go back to chasing this girl.
Wow. Interesting method you had there, Ramon. But all right. Well, let's find out what was going on behind the scenes and on camera in the world of TV as we find out how the Drew Carey Show got the green light. So the star of our show today came to prominence as a stand-up comedian with a very unique look. I do want to tell you, I was listening to his interview on the WTF podcast, oh, dearly departed WTF, and he was saying that Drew Carey's signature look, of the glasses, the crew cut, all of that, he was just like poor, out of work, and he was like, some people suggested he get into stand-up comedy and just try it out, but like, when he went to get up on stage and get on camera for like a big performance the first time, he literally had a Goodwill suit he got in a bag, like grab bag of clothes for $20. The glasses he got from the military because he had joined the military because he had no job. That's why he had the crew cut. That's why he had the glasses. And he said as soon as he walked out on stage, people just laughed at him because of how he looked, because he was so anachronistic. I just thought that was so interesting, because people might think like, oh, he probably grew up looking like that all the time, or, it was very calculated. It was just like, no, that was literally all he had to wear.
That's his look, because he got laser eye surgery when he got The Price is Right, and he started wearing fake glasses because no one recognized it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to stick with your branding, right? But here's the thing. Stand-up comedy had plenty of stars. Like, let's go back to the 60s and 70s, like that ended up on film and TV. You had Red Fox, you had Robin Williams, you had Bob Newhart, you had Freddie Prinze and Richard Pryor. Bizarrely enough, Andy Kaufman, if you know what his original act was, for him to end up on Taxi and stuff like that. But it seemed, though, that the proliferation of comedy clubs in the 80s, where there just seemed to be an endless supply of comedians, is where the network started developing sitcoms around popular stand-up comedians, like on a regular basis. Like, it was just clockwork. Oh, there's a hot comedian, give him a show. And that continued into the 90s and beyond. Now, among the most successful series, obviously, The Cosby Show and Roseanne and Seinfeld and Home Improvement. And of course, you already knew that. So, Will, I am curious, did you have a favorite stand-up comedian turned TV star as a kid?
Oh, probably Red Fox, just because like growing up with Sanford and Son, like because I was growing up like watching syndicated stuff. I don't think I knew Bill Cosby was like a comedian. Well, here's also the thing. A lot of us had never seen these folks as stand-up acts. You know what I mean? Like, I knew Bill Cosby had done comedy, but that wasn't my generation. Like, I only knew him as Cliff Huxtable. Same with Roseanne. Same with Seinfeld. Same with Tim Allen. you know? But like Red Fox, I think is the first one where I heard like, oh yeah, he also did comedy. But it's also jarring because if you hear a Red Fox album, you're like, that's not Fred Sanford. You know, like I found LaWanda Page's album and she plays Aunt Esther on Sanford and Son, and that will blow you. You're like, women knew these words back then. So, like, yeah, I'm gonna have to say it was probably Red Fox. He was the first one where I was like, oh, this guy is a comedian and he also has a TV show.
I am curious with Red Fox. So obviously Sanford and Son, but then didn't he have like two sitcoms after that, and one of which he died on the set of that show?
Well, I mean, he had like he has Sanford and Son, and then he has Sanford in 1980, which is them trying to get the band back together, but Lamont wouldn't come back. So they say he's working on the Alaskan pipeline, and they move in this fat white guy. So it turns into like a racial humor show of like, black people do this, white people do this. And I think it gets like 2 seasons. But yeah, you're thinking of the royal family where like it's Della Reese and Jackie and all of them. And yeah, they thought he was doing his whole like I'm coming Elizabeth bit, and he was having an actual heart attack and he died on set. So yeah, that's what happened there.
Yeah, that's wild. It's weird for me. I think even though like he wasn't only a TV star, but it was Gilbert Gottfried, because I didn't become aware, obviously, of his very raunchy, similar to Red Fox, stand-up comedy until years later. To me, he was just the scrunchy-faced yelling guy from the Problem Child movies and Aladdin, and then on TV, like Hollywood Squares and USA Up All Night. Like, he was the omnipresent cameo guest star in, like, TV and movies. Like, they just bring in Gilbert Gottfried for a few scenes or a few minutes or whatever. So it was weird because, yeah, he never did, have a sitcom that he headlined or anything like that. He was on Saturday Night Live in its most forgotten season. So nobody knows about that he was on Saturday Night Live. But it just felt like, through like the late 80s and mid 90s, you couldn't flip the channels without running into Gilbert Gottfried somewhere. He was like your grouchy uncle. You just love seeing him, but you're just like, why is he always around? But I loved him because of that, because I just couldn't escape him.
It's weird because like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you had the whole like, okay, let's give this stand-up comic a show. But now we're in this weird situation where it's like, hey, let's turn this influencer into a stand-up comic. So now it's like, it's kind of hard to know what came first. Like there are a lot of people doing stand-up who aren't funny. Like they were Vine stars or they're good in clips, but they can't write, and they like maybe they'll do crowd work, but they're not great at that because there's an art to it. So it's just, comedy is a strange beast that I could talk about all week. But
yeah,
anyway,
for sure.
In the 80s, there was one surefire way for comedians to find their way into the hearts of America, and inevitably a TV contract. That was by appearing on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. If Johnny liked your act and called you over to the couch for a conversation with him after your set, it was considered a declaration of your talent, and that the viewing audience, along with network executives, should accept you as truly talented. The star of our show this episode was the recipient of such an honor from Carson in 1991. Adam, do you have any particular memories of Johnny Carson's The Tonight Show?
It was weird. Like, I was not a night owl like you, so I didn't ever watch The Tonight Show during its actual airings each weeknight, but I knew Ed McMahon. I knew Johnny Carson. I knew the iconography of it all because it was an institution, the desk, the big curtain, and it was, parodied on so many things. So I was absorbing The Tonight Show through other programs, homages, like Muppet Babies had a segment where Miss Piggy, the grown-up Muppet Miss Piggy, had been on The Tonight Show, and then they overlaid the cartoon baby Piggy from Muppet Babies to have a quick conversation with Johnny in one little thing. And then like The Simpsons, like so much of that, like Krusty the Clown stuff was actually a lot of playful jabs at Johnny. He cameoed on an episode too.
Yeah, because he's twirling cars over his head.
Yeah, but that was because there were writers on the show that had written on The Tonight Show, and they kind of had a terrible experience working for Johnny, so they wanted to make fun of him. And then, like, they also wrote on Alf. So, like, Alf did a clip show from the set of The Tonight Show, stuff like that. I would say I'm much more familiar with the Leno era and the dancing Itos and all this stuff because that was where I was more aware of what was happening in pop culture. Even then, though, I wasn't really a fan. Like, I wasn't tuning in to The Tonight Show, for any particular reason. Occasionally there might be like some, Hollywood celebrity I wanted to see an interview with, but very rarely. So yeah, so like there's a whole podcast dedicated to The Tonight Show where this guy goes and interviews like every comedian, every writer, every intern, everybody who was ever on, The Tonight Show. And so I've started listening to that. It's very interesting to hear the stories, but overall, not a huge touchstone for me, even though I recognized how important it was. It's very strange.
Yeah, I know the lore. Like you were saying, like, I know it's an institution. I remember that Simpsons episode. I would love to know, and it's probably in this podcast you're talking about, I would love to know the comedians who were not invited to the couch, but still ended up successful. It's like that whole thing of how Beyonce lost Star Search. Like, I would love to know who, like, in the face of Johnny Carson adversity, still persevered. But, like, even though I was a night owl, I was watching everything but Johnny, like back when Joan Rivers had her Fox show, at which actually made her Johnny's enemy, because she was like the permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. Like I said, I know the lore. I know how Johnny's a terrible person. I know all of that stuff, but I didn't watch it. I was more into the other shows, and like you said, I was more into the Jay Leno era. I like when I recognize people from other things, and people kind of forget that in that era, Jay Leno was the Doritos guy. So I'm like, wow, the Doritos guy got his own talk show. Not even realizing that he was Johnny's permanent guest host after the falling out with Joan Rivers. So it's like, it was all kind of like organic. And I know all of that and how like the people wrote for him went on to other things. Alf got his own late night show on TV Land modeled after The Tonight Show. But like, I didn't watch it. There was a vibe about Johnny Carson that he just never seemed like he was actually a good guy. And then over time, we found out that assessment was correct. So I've had no desire to revisit it. I know that like MeTV shows it every night. I think it's like edited to fit into an hour or something. Because Johnny's episodes were longer originally. But like, yeah, it wasn't a thing for me.
And, you mentioned Star Search as well. Drew Carey got his first national exposure on Star Search, hosted by Ed McMahon, who they had a stand-up comedy part of that competition. And so that was one of his big breaks as well. But, the breaks kept coming. He started working, like getting bit parts on sitcoms. He started writing on sitcoms. And then as his star was rising, one of those producers decided, hey, maybe this guy should headline his own series. So let's tell you what it was all about in our elevator pitch. So the Drew Carey Show debuted on the ABC network in September of 1995 and ran for 9 seasons until 2004. Now, the show hit its peak in the 3rd season when it was garnering 16.7 million viewers a week. Behind the scenes, the Drew Carey Show had a production staff with an impressive pedigree. Co-creator Bruce Helford, he had gotten his start as a writer on Family Ties. He was an executive producer on Roseanne, and post the Drew Carey Show would go on to create, the very successful George Lopez Show, among several others starring comedians. Norm, starring Norm Macdonald, which I hope we cover someday, and Nikki, starring Nikki Cox, which we don't need to cover. Meanwhile, consulting producer Sam Simon was a major force behind Cheers and The Simpsons, and a writer of many episodes in the later seasons of The Simpsons, Jennifer Crittenden. She wasn't writing The Simpsons, she's writing Drew Carey. She was in demand. Now, after the first season of the show was a hit, it entered the top 25 in the Nielsen ratings through season 4. So again, had a pretty good run there. Although the series then lasted for 5 more seasons, and each reflecting a greater decline in ratings. But luckily, Drew Carey was also producing and hosting the American version of the improv show Whose Line Is It Anyway? And by the end of that series, he takes a little break, but then he transitions into hosting duties on the daytime game show institution The Price is Right. There was a lot going on for Drew Carey, but certainly he became most famous for the sitcom initially. So I got to ask you, Will, did you watch the Drew Carey Show during its initial run?
Oh yeah. It was one of the rare shows that my mom liked. So I've mentioned before is like I would try to find these things just kind of like so we'd have something in common or something. But like, yeah, no, I watched pretty much all of it. I mean, I lost track of it when I went to college, but I've gone back and watched those like last 3 seasons, and I would say that those are probably my favorite now, even though they have issues, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, I definitely watched it at the time. How about you?
Well, I not only watched the Drew Carey Show, I taped it on VHS. And what was weird is when I went back to watch the first season in preparation for the show, I was so surprised that I was on board that early because that first season, I knew all those episodes by heart from having rewatched them so many times on my own tape. And I was kind of flabbergasted to learn that the show had lasted beyond season 3 because that's when I dropped off. I was just like, oh, okay, well, it's kind of the same thing every week. I don't need to watch this anymore. And I was like, 9 seasons is insane to me. I thought it was just like overlooked in syndication because I never caught it on TV post 1999. It wasn't like I'd flip channels and ever see the Drew Carey Show again. I thought it was just like there must be some weird rights issues or something that kept it from being rerun.
It had rights issues that like kept the DVD. Those couldn't really be done past a certain season. And it wasn't even streaming until when it came to Pluto at the end of 24. Like it hasn't been streaming a year legally yet. It was in syndication though. That's where I was double dipping, but I don't know if it went past like 2000. It was in syndication while it was still in first run on ABC. Like it wasn't a post network kind of deal. By the time it ended, A, that would have been like probably 2 syndication cycles, but B, I don't think anybody would have wanted the second half. It's a completely different show almost once you get to like season 6.
Yeah, because like I say, like had I known where to watch it, I would have kept watching it. And so yeah, that's weird that to know that it was out there, I just couldn't find it. Or maybe I just wasn't as plugged into TV during that era. So, but it is on Tubi now. I believe like the entire series has been released at this point on DVD, even though like with edits because of a lot of music rights and things like that. Like I was watching one episode where I remember Van Halen's Panama was being used by Mimi to get Drew, out of the house using the, rock and roll as the torture. And I was listening to it. I'm like, when do they say Panama? And all it was generic guitar that kept playing. I was like, oh, they cut that part out.
It's a very music-centric show sometimes. And I heard that, like, I don't know if it's the DVDs or if it's on Pluto, but there's 3 episodes that have been completely removed because they couldn't salvage them with stand-in music. Like, it's just too musically involved. Probably when they go to, like, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or something, Cleveland figures pretty prominently in things. But yeah, the music rights have held it up for all these years.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite bits might have been on one of those episodes because as I was watching through, I'm like, where is the gag? I can't even remember the setup, but it was something like Drew was trying to get himself busted by, management somehow. And so at the end of the episode, Oswald comes in too late after everything's been resolved and he's got sunglasses on and he's got a little paper bag and he's shaking. He's like, hey man, hey, you want some drugs? It's like, get out of here, Oswald. It's over. But I just loved his delivery of, you want some drugs? Anyway, tell us a little bit more about this show.
So what was the Drew Carey Show all about? Well, the series focused on Carey as a fictionalized version of himself who worked as a put-upon assistant manager of personnel in the fictional Winfred Louder department store. When Drew wasn't trading insults with his workplace antagonist Mimi Bobek, played by Kathy Kinney, he was hanging out in his Cleveland, Ohio home with his 3 childhood best friends, tough and sassy Kate, played by Krista Miller, snarky janitor Lewis, Droze, played by Ryan Stiles, and handsome dimwit Oswald, played by Dietrich Bader. Drew had various love interests and bosses over the years, while much of the consistent comedy, and sometimes drama, focused on his slightly rotund physique and office politics. But what made the show so popular with viewers? Let's find out as we get into our cheers.
Yeah, I feel like might be the longest cheers section that we're ever going to do on this show because there's so much to love. But I do think we have to start at the beginning, right? The various theme songs over the years were just genius. Like at the top, I parodied the original animated opening, but the production values of the 5 o'clock world opening for season 2, that was insane to me. I love Drew's terrible dancing. I love just like all the crazy like 60s stuff that's going on around him. It's like Broadway level performance. And then the pure rock and roll goodness in season 3 when they had Presidents of the United States of America cover Cleveland Rocks, which got me into that band. And I have like all their albums. I love them now. And every theme song I felt like was worth tuning into. At the very least, just tune in for the theme song. And sometimes they do shorter versions. Sometimes they had full versions of them. Like it was really great to watch. Now, it should be mentioned that the final season had an interesting gimmick where they would have cover versions of the old theme songs. And each episode would kind of be like a different musical style. It'd be like a techno remix or a reggae version or something. It was so odd, but it was fun. You know, it's like mix it up a little.
My favorite is probably there's like a Monday Night Football version of Cleveland Rocks, but like without the football visuals, it almost feels like it's like the A-Team, but it's clearly like a marching band. Like that's my favorite of like the final season. People take this for granted now, but at the time it was an experimental show. Like it wasn't afraid to try things. So like there was a live episode. There was the pop-up video episode. You know, like if something was like a trend, they would go with it and see how that would like work for them. It does start kind of like, oh, this is a workplace comedy kind of deal, but it turns into like a live action cartoon, especially when you get into the like road runner antics between Drew and Mimi, like the length they go to go after each other. So like it's a fun show, and I think that's why it lasted so long.
Yeah, exactly. Because you never knew what you were going to get. Like there's an episode where they go to Lewis's job at Drug Co. and they're just going through the halls and opening different doors. And there's just like all these crazy creatures. Some are computer animated, all these random things happening. Like, and yeah, it was just like, okay, we're just having a wacky show. But then they would have standard sitcom plots too, you know, mixed in. But I think, yeah, another element of it, right, is the Drew and Mimi dynamic. Like Drew himself is a great lead. He's just very likable. People can relate. What's weird though is I think specifically for me, after all these years, I was thinking back, I was like, why would I be drawn to Drew Carey? You know, this almost middle-aged guy, you know? And I think it was because I was an overweight kid and I rarely saw a decent portrayal of a larger person on screen. On our first episode, my disgust over the critics' portrayal of Jay and how they treated him, you know, the fat jokes at Drew's expense, they're less mean-spirited, and they mostly come from Mimi, who is also overweight. Plus, knowing that he had a lot of input himself into the self-deprecating humor, I think that helps it. And Drew Carey also, he does have some levels. He's not a great actor, and I didn't like the dramatic moments of the series, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but I did believe his sad performances, or sometimes when he'd get upset, like somebody pushed him too far. When those popped up, I'd be like, okay, Drew's got something going on here, right? So I think that there's value in him as the everyman, and he's just lovable all the way through. He doesn't really change. He doesn't become like superstar swelled head, like changes like, now I got to be cool Drew Carey every episode or something, you know?
He lives in the middle, and it's like you can like kind of accept when he gets down, but even when he gets happy, it's almost like he has to allow himself. He might say something like, yay, but like, it's not like effusive. Like, he's not just like overjoyed because he knows who he is. He knows life is going to disappoint him pretty quickly. So it's safe to just stay in the middle. He's a believable everyman. But I mean, he's also aspirational because I mean, he's a middle manager. He's not manager. He's always trying to get higher, but he's also not like the lowest on the totem pole. He has a string of unbelievably hot girlfriends.
Yeah.
Like none of them work out, and his friends are hilarious. So I don't know. That's what makes it great, but also the dynamic changes over the course of the show where you can't stay on for like 10 years doing the same stuff. But like this is still an era where things didn't necessarily have to change. They would, like maybe the kid would go off to college or something like that because he was just too big to be a teenager. But here is like there's actual dynamic changes. Like, yeah, he and Mimi are adversaries in the beginning, but then they're in-laws by the middle because
Right.
Mimi marries Drew's brother. But then when you get into the weird final seasons where like Drew's brother leaves her to go find himself, but like Drew becomes her support system with her and her son, you know? So then it's like Uncle Drew is almost like a father figure. And so you watch Drew have to take on these roles when he's not any different of a character. He doesn't have the toolkit or the life experience to be in this situation. It's just he has found himself there and he's doing the best that he can.
Yeah, that is very common for Drew. And but like you're saying, with Kathy Kinney as Mimi, she is an all-time breakout sitcom character. She never failed to deliver, like from her very first appearance on the show, but she just has the perfect balance of giddy delight and menace when she's delivering her insults to Drew. And like nobody says pig better than Mimi. She has so many different deliveries of calling him a pig, and obviously like variations on pig, right? Which is so cool. And also, we have to give kudos to the wardrobe and makeup teams on the Drew Carey Show for giving her a perfect look every episode. So many costumes, so many just original makeup designs and everything, which I assume Kathy Kinney didn't like, or they got rid of that department, because in those final seasons, she has very toned down makeup. She just has some blue eyeshadow on, but it's not as intense and like clownish almost as it was early on in the series. Every time I see her in those later episodes, I'm like, she just looks so boring now.
No, it aligns with how she has changed, because when the show starts, she's a single woman in heat on the prowl, and she thinks she looks good. But like once she becomes a wife and a mother, she kind of, as it is wont to happen, she stops trying as hard. But it's also like, it's not that she doesn't care, it's just like she's got different priorities now. So she is a mom to Gus, because in the final season, Gus is like 8. She gets with Steve fairly early, and she's just in a different place, but you see her, and she's clearly Mimi Bobek. Is just that she's not trying to find a man as much. And there are episodes when she doesn't think Steve is coming back where she does kind of go back to those old ways because she's trying to find a man again. And like who she ends up with is pretty surprising if you've stuck with the show the entire run.
Yeah, it's out of nowhere. I mean, I'm watching that last episode. I'm just like, huh? Of all the people. Okay. We'll talk about him in a minute. But I do have to say, you mentioned this. My favorite thing about the show back in the day when I was watching it is the chemistry of the 4 main cast members, of the friends. I loved how much fun they all seemed to be having on set. And I think I mentioned this back in our Mad TV episode. I later hated when Jimmy Fallon was breaking all the time on SNL and would laugh in the middle of a skit. But when they did it on the Drew Carey Show, it just felt like they couldn't get through any of their takes without laughing at the jokes because they thought it was so funny. So the director ultimately just had to go with the one where they barely could hold in their laughter. Because if you watch like every scene, like Diedrich Bader is like about to crack up or whoever, like there's always somebody who is laughing. And so it was very endearing and genuine. It brought the audience in. It made you feel like you were part of the gang. You were in on the fun. The fact they left it in. And I hadn't seen that in any TV show before. Everything was, set up, punchline, laughter, set up, punchline, laughter. And here it was just like, wait, and the cast is laughing at themselves because they think they're funny, or whatever. Like that just meant the world to me.
It's something about like how TV changed. If you go back to the 70s, there are episodes where like you could tell the cast wasn't briefed on certain things. I know there's situations in like Mary Tyler Moore. There's situations like the infamous WKRP episode about the turkeys. They're breaking the entire episode because like it seems like they weren't briefed on what was going to happen to the turkeys. So it's like there was an era when they let that fly, and then TV got real kind of like regimented in the 80s and 90s. But no matter who we're talking about here, like, yeah, the core four, but even just like the supporting characters, Mr. Wick is just a great character. But even when you get to like Ian Gomez's Larry Almeida, there are a lot of like sniveling, kind of like creepy people on the periphery, but they do it so well. And because Drew is so vanilla, he doesn't have to do much to amp up the people around him. Like Lewis and Oswald work so well as cartoon characters because Drew is not in those escapades. They'll run in dressed as elves and say like, oh, Santa's dead. And then like Santa makes a collect call, like things like that. And Drew's just like, I guess it's Santa. He knows it's like the Winfred Louder Santa, but he's the straightest straight man in the craziest of situations.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, he allowed all these different character actors just to come in, especially in The Office, right? Like there was the very drab Nora who would come in and she actually sues Drew for sexual harassment. There's a multi-episode arc. He posts a cartoon in his cubicle of a caterpillar doing it with a French fry. That is what is constantly, and he's always shown it to people. What do you think of this? Is this funny? Come on. And then she just stuck around as like the Office weirdo or like an occasional carpool participant. Like she would just be around. It wasn't like she was there just for that storyline. Larry, yeah, the bald guy who just complained a lot. But like you say, he makes it to the end of the series and he's dating Mimi, and you're just like, what? Okay.
Well, he disappears.
Yeah.
He disappears when. Okay, so let's back up because I think we're focusing on the era that you're familiar with. After season 3, season 4, let's go to like season 6, right? So they all work in Winfred Louder, which is the kind of department store that no one today would recognize. This is an institution that was, let's think of like Marshall Fields or like the May Company. This isn't a JCPenney. This is like a storied department store. There's no chain. Like this is specific to Cleveland. And Mrs. Louder herself would come in and she's like this old crotchety mean lady, but like Larry actually starts dating her at one point because he sees that as his way to get ahead. So he becomes like her boy toy. It's not even like a relationship, it's just a booty call situation. But Mrs. Louder is probably in her mid 80s. That's what we're dealing with here. So it's one of those think of like Harrods in London, or just like the original Sears or Macy's in New York. They're like different floors. So you've got like housewares to men's fashion to appliances. So like Oswald works in like the warehouse, that kind of deal. Kate does something there sometimes. But what happens, as in what happened in the real world, once we get to the end of the 90s, those stores are dying or merging or being bought out. So Winfred Louder goes out of business. And overnight, it becomes a .com, because this is before the .com bubble burst. So it becomes something known as the Everything Store, which is sort of like a crazy precursor to Amazon.
Right.
Even though Amazon exists at this point, it's just selling books. And the joke is kind of like, how can you have a store that sells everything? It's like, that's the dream. And it's run by these two young guys who like are very familiar to you if you watch TV in the late 90s. Like there's Kyle Howard, who was the son of Robert Urich on Love Boat The Next Wave on UPN. And then his brother, who is the announcer for Let's Make a Deal currently on CBS, they started this .com of the buy everything store. Like, you don't have the Jeff Bezos, the older billionaires. This is back when they were giving young guys too much money, so they don't really know what they're doing and they don't have a vision, and they keep Drew and Mimi on, but Drew doesn't know his job. That's the joke. They've given him this title that makes no sense to him, but he's still in his desk, in his cubicle. Winfred Louder is a little more hip now, like the workplace, because it is this .com, but the new foil they bring in, because I always come back to this in one of those like what if situations, is Caitlin Olsen from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. She becomes the enemy of Mimi and Drew. So Mimi and Drew kind of team up to go against her, where she's just this like Ivy League grad who is trying to make a name for herself as an executive, but she's vapid and not really a great person, and she doesn't last long because, as we know, the bubble bursts. So then like the buy everything store is gone by, let's say, season 7, and then you've got a bunch of seasons of Drew just trying to find jobs. It's like Drew is a security guard, Drew is working at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, Drew's just like bouncing throughout life until the very end of the show, where they decide to get Mr. Wick to invest in their idea to bring back Winfred Louder, because now enough time has passed that such a concept would be retro. Like, it was outdated when they worked there, but now because of the .coms, people miss that old-fashioned retail experience. So the show ends with basically Winfred Louder back, Mr. Wick back in charge, even though Drew thought he was going to be in charge, and Drew is back in his original cubicle, Mimi's back in her original cubicle, so the show pretty much ends where it started.
Yeah, I mean, it is a wild ride. We should say all throughout also, the Friends have their Buzz Beer Company, so they have their own beer company that they're always having shenanigans with as well. But yeah, but like you say, like the familiar faces that come in and out back after, they disappear for a few seasons, then they're back. It's really interesting to see. Now, one familiar face, we have to say, Drew has many girlfriends over the series, and I had a major crush on his first love interest, Lisa, from the first season, played by Katie Silverstone. She was such a great compliment to his comedy. She played along perfectly. She could match every joke with one of her own. And there's an episode where they like do this thing every time they're fighting that they have to say what they love about each other. And he said, "I love your sense of humor and your sexy voice," which was definitely what I was responding to. Now, my wife is a clever brunette with a sultry voice, which was initially what attracted me to her. So Lisa was definitely priming the pump for me there as a teenager. I have a type, but I was glad that they brought her back for one episode late in season 2, because she's there beginning of season 2, and then she kind of goes away, and then she comes back because she's getting married to the guy who played Bizarro Jerry on that one episode of Seinfeld. But anyway, so she takes off and they have a nice wrap up. But it was just like, she was somebody that I longed to have a return on the series instead of another girlfriend who comes back that we will talk about in years. But I loved Lisa so much.
I love every one of Drew's girlfriends except for Kate. I love Lisa. Kate Walsh comes through there. I have loved Kate Walsh forever, and I hate that like she just pops back into Grey's Anatomy. She just won't go back officially. But like every one of Drew's girlfriends, he has the weird like Southern Belle who, like, I don't know if you watched this one because this is in the later seasons where they just randomly go to New Orleans for a weekend and they do one of those historical tours, and then he meets this Southern Belle tour guide at like a historical house, and they have like a spark. So then they spend like the weekend together, and he's kind of like, "Man, I hate that it has to end." And she's like, "But my life is here." But somehow he convinces her, she comes to Cleveland to live with him. So they like try to have a relationship. She has this overwrought like Southern accent, but they really struggle to make it work. Like, she has night terrors that she never told him about. So like in the middle of the night, she'll just sit up screaming bloody murder, or sometimes it gets physical. So he'll wake up and he has like a black eye and all this stuff because she beat him up in the middle of the night. She was awesome. I love Cynthia Watros. That's who he ends up with at the end.
Right,
And
Kelly.
she's from Titus, who like was also a comedian who got his own sitcom. For the most part, Drew never had a girlfriend that I hated.
I mean, he even dates the mom from the Partridge Family at one point. He dates all types of girls and ladies.
Wanda Sykes, he's dating her when he's the security guard. And I was like, what? Because Wanda Sykes was one of those people where like she has never been a great actor, but she somehow gets these talent holding deals. Like she doesn't even try in these roles.
Speaking of Shirley Jones, we should say he really does have a love for like TV moms because his own mom is Marion Ross from Happy Days, Mrs. Cunningham. And she's throughout the entire series, literally until the end. She plays his mom, named after his real mom. Like her name is Beulah.
And who's Oswald's mom?
Yep, we had Adrienne Barbeau there. So wait, what TV show is she from? I forget. Was she Maude?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I was like, because I know her from movies mainly, but
I know her from what is it? Swamp Thing?
Yeah.
But like I know that she's just known for her bodacious rack.
But she's also, I mean, but yeah, Swamp Thing, but like Escape from New York. She's in The Fog. But also she's Catwoman on Batman the Animated Series in the early seasons, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's from Maude.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, so that was awesome to have her there. Also at the end, Michael Gross from Family Ties plays Kelly's crazy dad. So like he's going to be the father-in-law, and he's pretty hilarious in his just one-time appearance, I think. But
no, he's there a couple times.
Oh, okay.
You got to watch more of that season. That'll probably be in the jeers.
Yeah. I do want to say too, I don't know if this is a cheer or a jeer. It's just kind of a fact. But in the first half of the first season only, Drew had a white trash neighbor named Jules. He played Farmer Fran in The Waterboy. Like he was like the weird cagey guy you couldn't understand. And his daughter Peaches, who was very flirty with Drew. But I felt like they were a fun bit of spice in the mix. They always had a funny gag to bring into an episode, like just bad neighbors, right? Like Jules would come over. He tried to buy Drew's dress shirts off of his clothesline while he's hanging them up. He's like, Drew, you got all these great shirts. You can't give me one. Come on now. You know, like stuff like that. So Drew always had something to complain about with them. But I think ultimately just they were one element too many to take up time in an episode, because you had the hanging out with friends, you had the workplace stuff to add. Okay, now we're gonna have a bad neighbors segment. Maybe just didn't make sense to keep them around, but I did like them in the beginning of the series. I never hated here's Jules again. He was fun.
I can't remember him, but I know that like a lot of shows try the neighbor angle. Like if you go to early King of Queens, Bryan Cranston, he's not white trash, but he is kind of like, he's sketchy. Like they buy an above ground pool and like Carrie and Doug want to like call the HOA because like the pool looks over their fence, things like that. And like after like that season, it doesn't work. That's just when the show is feeling out its chemistry, you know?
Yeah, because like later on they do the opposite, where it's like season 5 or 6, where they have like kind of a yuppie African-American couple that are always looking down on Drew, especially the husband. And he's always coveted. He's like focusing on Drew as a bad neighbor. I don't think that dynamic works better. Drew is already far enough down he needs to have somebody to punch down to, and there's very few people. So the fact that he could be disgusted with his neighbors at least and pick on them. But I did want to mention this. For the time, I think they did a decent job with the introduction of Drew's cross-dressing brother, Steve, played by John Carroll Lynch. Because yes, it's a little clumsy. You're going to have a lot of obvious big guy in dress jokes, okay? Because he's a very large man. He doesn't look feminine at all. But the character is portrayed very sympathetic. Drew is an accepting brother who just guides him through. He's like, well, Drew, I want to tell you about this. Yeah, fine. Come live with me, do whatever. Like, he defends his brother when some jerks are picking on him in a bar. They approached similar other topics, and that's more of a a mixed bag. They have lots of episodes, actually, more than you would expect, where Drew pretends to be gay. Like he wants to get like same-sex partner insurance benefits because he can't afford his dog's surgery. So that he has to say, that he and Oswald are married or like
he marries Mr. Wick.
Right.
It's like a season arc. And then it comes back at the end. That's how he's able to get the money from Mr. Wick for the store, because he married some like conservative Christian dynasty where he's like the weatherman for their TV network. It's like, oh, Satan's bringing rain. He's like Scotty McStorms.
But yeah, like again, the continuity on this show is amazing. But I feel like in the jokes, Drew is always eventually standing up and he says, people shouldn't have to justify who they sleep with or fall in love with. Like he says that. Now, it's always in a self-serving way to keep the ruse going, but it definitely seemed like the subversive way that they were trying to get that message out there. Like you definitely know what side of that argument Drew Carey is on. It's not, these people are weird, let's make fun of them. It's like, why do you got to be so judgmental and pick on people? Like it was kind of always where he seemed to be coming from ultimately. Because like, again, like Kelly, she's not really a stripper, but like when he meets her, she is like so down on her luck. She has to do an amateur stripping night and he's at a club where that's happening, things like that. Like all these people, like in situations where most people would probably look down on them. And he's just like, you know what? Everybody has ups and downs in their life. Everybody's got something that's their thing. Let's just help people and accept people. I thought it was kind of interesting that he was able to approach that in such a wacky, cartoony show over the years.
I think it does handle the Steve thing pretty well. I mean, I don't know if I feel like we're required to say this. Like, I don't know if we are qualified to say whether or not it was successful, but it's not punching down, but also I remember the episode they're having like the family reunion and Steve wants to come out to like the rest of the family. This is what I do. And he's all nervous and everything. And he goes out in like the dress and like you just kind of hear everybody cheer for him. You're like nobody cared. And he was worried for nothing, So like it did have great messages at that part of the show.
Yes.
We're gonna talk more.
Right. Last thing I just want to mention is we have to point out like the biggest episode probably for us growing up as comic book fans, but there is an episode where Drew wins the Batmobile from Batman Forever, and he's loving every minute of it. And everybody's trying to talk about it. They're like, why didn't you take the money, the cash value of the car? No, his girlfriend's like, no, I don't want to drive to dinner in the Batmobile. No, we're not going to meet my parents while you're driving the Batmobile. Like all this kind of stuff. He starts wearing a Batman and Robin tie. He has a Batman pin on his jacket. Oswald and Lewis dress up as Batman and Robin. And that felt like one of those unscripted things, or that some of the people in the cast didn't know it was happening, because when they walk in, everybody's just like holding it in at them in their outfits, But going forward, what I noticed is after that episode, as part of the living room set, in the background, there's always a Batman statue. And on the nightstand or whatever you call it, next to the couch, there's a Catwoman statue that remains as part of the living room set for quite a while. It's kind of like Jerry Seinfeld and all his Superman decor. So again, I just love that kind of continuity. It's like, remember when I had the Batmobile? And here are those little monuments to that.
See, the Superman statue meant more on Seinfeld because we know that Jerry is a fan of Superman. For me, I always felt the Batmobile episode was one of the first heavy-handed experiences of corporate synergy I had experienced, because it is a Warner Brothers show. That's why those things were there. It would have meant more if it was a Hulk statue. It's that Big Bang Theory thing of like, they go to a comic shop that doesn't sell Marvel. And it's the thing here of like, this is your studio overlords making you put this here. Because there was still a studio store at that point. So you could have gone to buy that statue that you saw in the background of that episode.
Well, it's a good point. It's not like he was always making reference to Batman and Robin, and this was the culmination, whereas Jerry always was dropping Superman references in the scripts,
right.
On Seinfeld. So yes, there is a little cynicism there, but there's more about the show that we might be a little cynical about ourselves. So why don't we get into our jeers?
Boo! Boo! Boo!
Krista Miller.
What? You like Krista?
Krista Miller. And it's crazy because growing up, I thought she was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I thought she was awesome, but like revisiting the show, I think she's terrible. Like, I don't believe that she grew up with them. And they even said that, like, this was her first real role. And they were kind of iffy on casting her, but like, she won them over through like a videotape. But I enjoy the friend dynamic so much more when she is gone. I don't enjoy Kate at all because I don't think Krista Miller had found her strength as an actress yet. Like, you will go on to find that her sweet spot is playing a bitch. Kate is not a great person. The two guys are dumb. Drew is like the middleman, and Kate is like morally gray. Like, she'll sleep with her friends' boyfriends, things like that, but she's aimless. But like, when you follow her afterwards, basically anything her husband has a hand in, because she's married to Bill Lawrence. So on Scrubs, she's a bitch, but a sympathetic bitch. On Cougar Town, she ends up married to Ian Gomez, who is Larry in Drew Carey, so it's like a reunion. She's once again a sensitive bitch. I don't think Kate is on the same level as the rest of this cast. From the improv to the timing to anything, Cynthia Watros is so much better in comparison.
Wow.
Krista Miller does not work for me on this show.
I guess, I don't know, man. Like, because I missed her when she finally left the series, but I caught up now and I'm just like, oh, Kate leaves and she marries some random Navy guy? Like, what's going on? Because she's so unseasoned, she seems the most natural. She seems the most girl next door type to me. And I love her voice. Like, I love her little weird speech impediment thing she has, or lisp, or whatever you want to call it. Like, she just has a very interesting manner on screen. And I love all her bits that she does. But there is a Kate related person that I do not think worked. In the first season, Kate starts dating this good looking guy they knew in high school named Jay, who becomes a regular supporting cast member. He's basically the male version of Lisa. You know, he's just like this good looking guy who can hang and is fun. But as much as I loved Lisa, I hated Jay because he's the total wrong vibe for the show. Like, they were very Midwest and he seems very like New York City type of guy. Like, there's no way he grew up in Ohio. But like, Jay, he just never gelled with the main crew, but he was always there. They kept putting him in. But the problem is, it's not that he's bad. He's just too charismatic to be the guy in the background waiting to get one line in every once in a while. That actor, his name is Robert Torti. Like, he should have been on a Ned and Stacy type show, like playing the suave ladies man who had to deal with a stuck-up female roommate or something. He's like, hey, relax, let's have a good time. Like, that was kind of his vibe. Now, he did a lot of like soap operas and, you know, he's still a working actor. He still does stuff. But every time he was on screen, I was just like, get Jay out of here.
He doesn't convincingly seem like he would have been friends with them, and I guess maybe he knew them in high school. Maybe they weren't friends necessarily. Yeah. But like, you're right, he's a delivery guy. He's got an earring, which is in an air, like, we're before the time where like just everybody, like, it's a hoop. It's not even like a stud. He's got a hoop earring. You kind of feel like he's too good for Kate, because Kate, she's not exactly a scumbag, but like, she's not into commitment. I feel like you look at that relationship and you know it's not gonna last, and you know it's gonna be Kate's fault. So my whole thing of like watching it organically is that whole question of like, does he stay around when they break up? And the answer is no. No, he does not. Because he's almost like Richie from King of Queens. I think a lot of shows brought in these like greasy guys where it's like, well, we got this rotund straight man as the star, so let's bring in some eye candy for the girls. And like, they never work out.
No, but again, he's overshadowing Drew then and Oswald, who's the closest you get to the good looking one, you know, in the main cast. So it's just like, this guy should not be here. But it was the same thing. You said you liked all of Drew's girlfriends. I cannot stand his third season girlfriend, Nikki, because unlike Lisa, she never had chemistry with Drew. Number one, she always seemed kind of out of his league. Like, she just seemed like she didn't want to be there with him. I think she was like a real estate agent who kind of didn't like him to begin with anyway. And I think that was sort of the point with that character, because she has this weird arc where she gains weight throughout the season. They actually put the actress in fat suit prosthetics, and she eventually dumps Drew after they get engaged, just off the cuff, because she blames him for her weight because of his own overeating lifestyle. That episode really affected me as a kid because it's really awkward. Like they were taping themselves in the bedroom and then she has a breakdown and it's like videotaping this whole conversation that gets really serious and like all this stuff. And I was just like, whoa. But it was just a total downer plot line. And having her on the show was just constantly annoying, even before like it starts getting more negative. It starts going downhill. Like even when she was supposed to be cool with everybody, she wasn't. And then when I found out they brought her back in season 8 as this slobbish food monster who's trying to get her life back together, so Drew lets her move in, and then he starts dating Kelly, like who he also lets live with him, basically. Like it is a weird dynamic, and I can't think of anybody I wanted to see less on screen than having Nikki back.
See, Nikki was played by Kate Walsh, so that's the one that I love Kate Walsh. But like, yeah, the food thing, I don't know. Keep in mind, this is the era of the clumps. You couldn't do that episode now. Like, that's probably one of the things they didn't handle well. But I do believe there's like truth there, where it's like, if you are an overweight person dealing with someone who's struggling with being overweight, if that person decides they want to tackle it or whatever, you are either on board or you're an enabler. You know what I mean? It's like that's what you're getting into there. Mike and Molly dealt with that in the beginning. My biggest issue with that show was it was supposed to deal with these like two overweight people who meet in Overeaters Anonymous and fall in love. But then Melissa McCarthy's career took off and the overeating aspect gets thrown out. They're no longer trying to lose weight. Now they're trying to get married or trying to have a baby or trying to get out of debt. So like, it's a hard thing to discuss in America because people feel certain ways about it. And I mean, GLP-1s are making tons of money now. But for the time, I understood that plot and where they were coming from. But speaking of downers, because I go back and forth on this, if you only like the cartoon aspect of the Drew Carey Show, you should probably stop around like season 6. Honestly, you should stop once Kate leaves, because what happens then is once Winfred Louder closes, once the Everything store closes, the show gets down. Basically, Drew starts, I want to say it's season 8, because it's basically like a 2-season arc. Drew decides that he is running out of time to get married and start a family. So what he does is he sets a wedding date, and he buys all the stuff. He rents the hall, he gets the caterer, all of this, but he's not even in a relationship because he feels that's what he needs to motivate him. So basically, you have 2 seasons of him trying to run out the clock as his life gets worse and worse. So it's like now he no longer has a car, so he rides the bus. So like the bus driver becomes a supporting cast member, and he kind of hates Drew. He's just this old black guy who's trying to get to retirement. So it's like he'll ask the guy for advice since he's like older and should be wise, but the guy's just like, I drive a bus. I don't know anything about your crazy life, you know? And so like now you watch Drew go on this string of just terrible dates and things. Like when he meets the Southern Belle chick, that's during the timeline, but like he can't force her into being what he needs her to be. Now keep in mind, Kelly has been introduced at this point in time, and we know that Kelly has come to have feelings for Drew, but Drew doesn't come around till probably the end of season 8. But then Kelly kind of like, to get back at him for taking so long, she's not immediately like, okay, let's get together. So I think he proposes to her 4 different times before she says yes. But here's where it gets really messed up and bad. He gets Kelly pregnant. So then it turns into like, well, I guess Kelly's the one. And Kelly is coming from like a bad marriage and doesn't necessarily want to get married again and doesn't feel she has to be married to be a parent, while Drew is trying to be the old-fashioned, like, this is how you do things, but also I've got all these things like paid for, so we gotta have this wedding. But this final season is when ABC really didn't care about the show anymore, so they aired it out of order. And the problem is now on Pluto, when you watch it, it's aired with the ABC airing. So you will watch Kelly's pregnant. Kelly's pregnant. Kelly's not pregnant. She's not with Drew. She's not with Drew. She's not with Kelly's pregnant. Kelly's not with Drew. And then like it comes together at the end where like the baby's coming. He's trying to get married before it comes. They find a chaplain in the hospital who they beg to come marry them, but he's giving the last rites to someone and he can't leave that room. So they get married in that room, but then the baby starts to come out. And so like it's halfway out before he finishes. And they're like, does this count? He's like, well, I stopped at the vending machine on the way up, so we'll just give it to you. You know, and like that's the end of the show. And it's just kind of like, it's not a happy ending. I don't know if Drew Carey was going through some things at the time because he almost becomes unrecognizable. It's not the same Drew that we loved those first few seasons where you're saying like, oh, life rolls off of him. Some people have some good, some people have some bad. I honestly think Drew Carey was coming out more in the character to its detriment. His politics were coming through, which we had never seen before because as you saw, he was fine with Steve. He was fine with everything. Like everybody's just trying to live their lives and be happy. Around this time, Drew Carey was commonly calling himself a libertarian. He is a libertarian who was cool with guns. And there is an episode where like he and Kelly realize like they are just polar opposites because she's very liberal and suddenly Drew is watching Fox News and he's like, he's conservative. Now you could look at him and be like, okay, he looks conservative. He was a Marine, but politics had never come into play. And now we're at a point in the world, this is 2004. We're at a point in the world where politics is really charged and somewhat divisive more than they had been. This is post 9/11 and suddenly Drew Carey is a Fox News watching gun toting because he wants a gun in the house. And Kelly's like, no, I don't believe in that. And he's doing nothing but watching like Hannity and all this other stuff and not for the joke. This is supposedly who we think Drew is, but that's not who he was before. And I guess my big issue with all of this is he never gets his mojo back. Like even though I said the show ends with him right back at Winford Louder at his own desk and all that, he's still not the Drew we knew 9 years ago. He may look like him, but I don't think the character ends in a better place than where we found him.
Yeah, unfortunately, and he is wedding obsessed the entire series. I mean, like, it is weird. He's always chasing that. Like, if you look at Drew Carey's personal history, he's been engaged several times and they always get broken off. Like, it feels like reality is being reflected.
Always a bridesmaid is Drew Carey, basically.
Yeah, but like, speaking of which, like, that's my final jeer just for the series is whenever a wedding comes up, it ruins the series. For example, Kate and Oswald get engaged. That was a terrible idea because it makes Oswald less of a goofball and more of a bitter jerk because Kate leaves him at the altar. So for the first few episodes of season 3, like all the jokes that previously just would have been like friendly jabs, you know, that you laugh off, now just feel like vindictive, they're sharp, they're mean. And I thought, oh, well, that goes away. And it does that season, it kind of fades, but then it comes back. He brings that stuff up in like seasons 5 and 6 and 7. Like he's still like, oh, well, you know about running away, don't you, Kate? Like he still like does that.
But I mean, that's because Kate starts dating and then possibly marrying his best friend. You know, like he had to process that. And I kind of like that they didn't just throw it out because I don't think that's how life works. You know, like it's just sort of like it was still in his face. You got these people saying like, oh, I finally found my true love or I've never been this happy before. And you're standing there like, oh, okay. So what we had was, you know.
Yeah, well, and understandably, like you say, Kate then gets engaged to Drew and they're dating for a while. And she's been like kind of pressured into that by her mom and stuff. Like Drew's been there your whole life and stuff is always said like, he's your best friend. Shouldn't you marry your best friend? All that. She breaks it off because she doesn't want to have kids, but Drew does. But then when she sticks around after that, it's even more awkward. There's 2 friends in the group that she has now, basically left. And you're just like, so it always feels like a bad choice. Now, Drew also jumps in like for plot reasons. He'll marry random people to help them out and things like that. I don't know why Krista Miller left exactly, but like they just marry her off real quick. She's like, oh, by the way, Drew, I was gone and I met this guy a week ago and he's in the Navy and now we're getting married and bye. And that just opens up old wounds for poor sad sack Drew.
It's been so long, but I think it was contractual because that would have been around the time to renegotiate. And I think they probably didn't want to pay her as much as they were paying Dietrich because that's Hollywood at the time. But yeah, I think that's what happened around then. We're in Jeers, but I will say, despite like how I didn't like the tonal change necessarily, by contrast, it makes me love Lewis and Oswald more.
Yes.
Because like they are what brings the boys to the yard. Like, if you want humor, they're gonna bring it. It's not coming from Drew. Like, it might come from, like, Drew and Kelly, because Kelly really learned from Titus. Like, she's got great comedic timing, she was beautiful, and she was funny. Like, she was genuinely funny in the way they handled things. There's the episode where they go to the timeshare, and for some reason, because I feel like I briefly talked about this, after Unhappily Ever After, Jeff Pearson plays two characters. He plays a seedy politician, or he plays a cad. Like, this old, lecherous, like, I'm gonna get this woman in bed cad. It's exactly who he wished he was in that basement with Mr. Floppy or whatever. So that's who he is in that episode where it's like, well, they're engaged, but they're not married yet, so I'm gonna try to sleep with Kelly. But then they like leave the engagement ring there and they have to go back and they find out that like he's doing it to someone else. So like there's humor to be found, but it's mainly Lewis and Oswald cranked up to 11 now.
I will just say, I do like the Kelly character. I think overall, if that's who Drew is going to have his as close to a happily ever after as you're going to get, I think she was wonderful. She's no Lisa, though. So maybe that'll have something to do with my pitch as we get into our role as the show doctors. So I would say, aside from the fact that I feel like the series should have ended at like season 5 or get a victory lap season at season 6, and then you're just like, okay, we wrapped it up. The series finale, the machinations of Drew marrying Kelly and all of that is unsatisfying. His obsession with not having a kid out of wedlock and all this stuff, it seemed uncharacteristic, as you said. So I really wish there's plenty of moments of a downer on this series. So give us a downer where Kelly gets killed off in like an auto accident halfway through, if we're making it all the way to this season, halfway through the 9th season. And then you can have your dramatic moment. Okay, he's mourning. What does he really want in his life? You're saying Winfred Louder's coming back. He's trying to get back to his happy place. And so it comes full circle with the return of a recently widowed Lisa. And her husband has died also. So she can relate. She could be there for Drew. And they rekindle their romance. And we end the series on their wedding. That's what I want.
We are not How I Met Your Mothering Drew Carey. We're not spending all these years with these multiple characters just to end up back.
But again, as you say, because I didn't go on the full journey during the original run, I just want to go back to the happy times that I knew. So I would be a bad producer, and the executive producers coming in just like pushing the script in their face. Guys, I'm telling you, this is the ticket. This is what the people want. But yeah, that's the only satisfying thing I could find for me, because the show did evolve and did try these new things. And I don't know that there was, I think 9 seasons is more than enough. So what do you do to fix the show and make it interesting all the way through? Is it just shorten it, or did you have another idea, Will?
I air them in order. That's my main thing. Like, it's really bad because, I mean, it's like Mimi's living with Drew, and you're like, why did this happen? And then you find out Gus started a fire, but the fire episode happens after she's lived with Drew for 3 episodes. And it's just like, it's very whiplash inducing. This is the era where like they're not making shows necessarily for syndication anymore. You know, they're making them just like, we're telling an overarching season-long story, and you gotta air those things in order. But as far as show doctors, 9 seasons is more than enough. I really wouldn't do anything here. I wouldn't bring it back now. Like, I don't think we need to revisit Drew Carey 20 years later. Although in some ways he looks younger than he did then, because he kind of like, Drew was one of those guys who hung out at the Playboy Mansion, you know, who like actually like hung out at the Playboy Mansion, which you just don't hear about anymore. That was something you did in the 70s and 80s, but he's an old school guy. But I don't need to see Lewis and Oswald still living together like at this point. And they do little reunions. I mean, when Dietrich Bader was on American Housewife, he did get Ryan Stiles and Drew Carey to drop by for an episode. So they do kind of get back together, and that's cute to see. But call it died of old age and natural causes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was a fun show at its zenith, and and you want to encapsulate that. I have fond memories of the Drew Carey Show. I think it got everything that it could have wanted to out of it. The last thing I think we should point to, though, if they were going to bring anything back, Drew Carey, they had the April Fool's Day episode where they would intentionally put in all these jokes in the background. People would call each other the wrong name, or somebody's door like would be different, or whatever it was, like even to the point of like the opening credits, like they would put in outtakes and bloopers from the filming of the credits stuff, where Drew's fallen down or missing cues or whatever, so like they would do all that, and the idea was that the viewers were supposed to write down every mistake they could find, then send in their whole list, and then if they won, they got to have like dinner with Drew Carey. I think they got to like be on an episode or something like that, like just random prizes that you could get, which was very fun because they would also get like cameos from people. Like they would like replace Kate for a minute and have a different actor come in, like, oh, it's one of the guys from Welcome Back, Kotter, and you're like, what's he doing here? Just stuff like that. So it was a very fun concept. You mentioned the live episodes, so like that's the only thing I could think if they were ever going to give it any other little twist is like, well, what if every episode was wacky in some way or live or whatever? It's the actual live sitcom, like that's because that's the world he was living in for so long with Whose Line Is It Anyway? So why not?
And I mean, he tried to kind of take things to the next level because there is Drew Carey's green screen, which I think thankfully is outside of our range, so we can't really cover it. But it's after this show where like a lot of this cast ends up over there, and it combines this show with Whose Line, but also space age green screen technology where they would like act with the help of a green screen based on like prompts and cues they've been given.
I see. Well, hey, there's a tweak to the format. Give us something interesting. But here's the thing. We are at the end of the year, and we wish you all the happiest of holidays as we go into 2026. But we're going to kick off the new year, but with an old show from the 50s that got a new life in the 80s. See, we're all over the place here. We're talking about the new Leave It to Beaver, aka Still the Beaver. You can find it streaming on YouTube. It's on archive.org. This is going to be fascinating. We love television history here. So to go back to a sitcom that is like the quintessential sitcom, I mean, it's kind of the baseline that everybody talks about. And then they tried to reinvent it in the 80s. They tried to bring us back into that world. Well, we're going to find out all about it. So be here in 2026. But in the meantime, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.